Hello and welcome to TVP World. I'm your host, Diana Skaya. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas says sanctions against Georgian politicians could be one way the bloc addresses growing political turmoil in Tbilisi. Now, the comments came as Europe's heads of state descended on the Belgian capital to find consensus among a raft of major political issues facing the continent. Now, Angela Squins reports from Brussels.
Figuring out how the EU's 27 heads of state address the growing crises around the world, including Georgia, Ukraine and Syria, are high on the agenda for the Foreign Affairs Council meeting today. Now, this meeting in Brussels will be chaired for the first time by the EU's new foreign policy boss, Kaja Kallas. Now, Kaja Kallas said that the EU leaders would need to figure out how they were going to address what's going on in Syria, especially with the country's new assumed leadership, the HTS group. Now, this group has been labelled a terrorist organisation by a range of countries. She also said foreign leaders would be discussing new sanctions slapped onto Russian, Chinese and North Korean officials that are aiding and enabling Russia's ongoing invasion of Ukraine. Now, this would also be used to address Russia's shadow fleet. Now, also on the agenda is what is going on in Georgia and how the EU can respond to the growing political crisis that has evolved into weeks' worth of protests and a crackdown in the opposition. Here is what she had to say.
First of all, this list has already been proposed, so we are discussing this list, but everybody needs to agree to the list, and we are not there yet. So let's see if we are going to get there. What comes to the presidential elections, then the president is in place until the 29th of December, and a lot could happen in between.
Conclusions for the Foreign Affairs Council will be announced today with a press conference scheduled for around 5 in the afternoon. My name is Angela Squins. I will be reporting on these issues for you from the Belgian capital for TVP World.
There's a legal and practical case for using frozen Russian assets to rebuild Ukraine. Latvian Foreign Minister Baiba Braže said in Brussels on Monday. She also commented on Hungary's obstruction of the European Peace Facility, deeming it not acceptable.
We had a good exchange on confiscated assets of Russia. Our strong position is, just as the central banks of the Nordic Baltic countries, Poland and a few others, that there is both a legal and practical case to use Russian confiscated assets for the reconstruction of Ukraine, and we should be able to move ahead with that. We have to unblock it. I mean, we have to get to unblocking it. It's absolutely ridiculous to do that.
And what is the strategy here?
There are various proposals on the table. This is not the place to sort of go through them, but there is a scenario, but it's absolutely unacceptable.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz will face a confidence vote on Monday, paving the way for an early election next year. Now, this comes after Germany's governing coalition collapsed last month when the Chancellor fired his finance minister in a long dispute over the country's weak economy. Now, the German Chancellor called the vote himself. If he loses it, he will have to ask Germany's president, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, to dissolve parliament in a process which would trigger snap elections. Now, new elections must be held within 60 days of parliament being dissolved. A vote of confidence has so far been called 5 times in the history of the Federal Republic of Germany. The last time was almost 20 years ago by former SPD Chancellor Gerhard Schröder.
Guten Morgen.
Germany is at a political crossroads as Chancellor Olaf Scholz faces a decisive vote of confidence. A TVP World spoke to Andreas Sumland from the Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies, who talked about the difficulties facing Germany and its economy and said that countless failures ranging from tensions to disunity are the reason why Scholz's coalition ultimately failed.
The coalition for the last 3 years has been the first three-party coalition in the history of the Federal Republic of Germany. And it is now seen by many commentators as not a success because there has been a lot of tension, a lot of discussion within the coalition, disunity, and also economic stagnation or even decline to a certain degree, and this has been largely blamed on this coalition, although one has to say that the current stagnating situation in which Germany is in, if you look at the economic data, is largely a legacy of the failures of the previous chancellors or the previous chancellor, Angela Merkel, who has missed to initiate a number of innovations in the German economy and public administration that were needed and that were delayed. And only now Germany is trying to introduce these innovations, these necessary innovations. But it will now take some time before they take effect.
A new regulation designed to redirect funds from the EU's cohesion policy to support victims of natural disasters was presented at the plenary session of the European Parliament on Monday. Now, the instrument, called Restore, aims to strengthen the EU's capacity to respond to natural disasters, ensuring faster and more effective aid to communities in need. Now, the regulation is expected to play a crucial role in disaster response efforts, particularly in countries like Poland, which have experienced severe flooding in recent months. Now, European lawmakers are now set to discuss the next steps for implementing this emergency financial support system. As demonstrations continue in Georgia, Elizabeth Bra, a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, joined TVP World to talk about the impact of the ongoing protests and the determination of Georgian society.
Well, what we can see from the protests is that they're continuing and that the people who participate are determined. But the question is what impact that will have. Those in charge can decide to ignore it, and clearly the presidential election or the outcome will be carried out as planned, regardless of these protests. I think what we are seeing is a split in Ukrainian society, both between ordinary Georgian society, both between ordinary Georgians and then and then at the same time Georgians and the ruling party, and it's unclear how the protesters, how they can achieve what they want to achieve, even though we in the West consider it laudable and indeed the only path forward for Georgia.
Language barriers and a lack of coordination are hindering cooperation between Russian and North Korean forces on the front lines in the Kursk region. Now, a report by the Institute of the Study of War suggests that a common goal is not enough to carry out an effective offensive. Now, reports of poor coordination and rising tensions are emerging just weeks after tens of thousands of North Korean troops joined Russians in Russia's Kursk region. The ISW reports that the troops deployed by Pyongyang have mistakenly fired at the vehicles of Akhmat Special Forces, the Chechen armed formation fighting for Russia. Now, the report suggests that mounting issues such as a language barrier and the disruption of operations could only lead to further friction should the cooperation continue. In anticipation of New Year's Eve celebrations, Austrian authorities have decided to crack down on illegal fireworks. Now, every car traveling from the Czech Republic is waved aside and inspected by border officers who are searching for fireworks smugglers. Now, each year, the Austrian police confiscate hundreds of kilograms of fireworks. On top of stronger security at the Czech-Austrian border, officials in Vienna came out with a public service announcement. Authorities warned that illegal fireworks can be dangerous and advised buying only certified local products. They also advised that using illegal fireworks can lead to serious health risks on top of severe fines imposed by Austrian police. The head of South Korea's ruling People Power Party has resigned following President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment. Now, his statement coincided with South Korean investigators' request for the impeached president to appear for questioning. Now, South Korean law enforcement expanded a probe into whether the decree constituted a rebellion.
I am resigning from my position as the leader of the People's Power Party. The resignation of the Supreme Council members has destroyed the Supreme Council, making it impossible for me to carry out my normal duties as the leader of the party. I sincerely apologize to all the people who are suffering from this emergency situation. If we had not lifted the martial law that night, there could have been bloodshed between our citizens who would have taken to the streets and our young soldiers the following morning. That night, I was deeply afraid I might not be able to prevent such a tragedy.
Thousands of bikers dressed in Santa costumes took part in a recent motorbike Santa Claus parade in Barcelona. The event has become an annual Christmas tradition in the Catalan city. And with that Christmas story, we leave this edition of TVP World News. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching.